All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our session today. Really excited to dive into how to leverage ERGs and collaboration for collective learning. My name is Yassine Senghor, pronouns, well, any pronouns really, but she and her is fine as well. And I'm program manager at We Create Space, and I'll be hosting today's panel where we will be joined by the lovely Scott Sully, Katia Vileva, and David Knapp. So really excited to get into that conversation. But just before we do that, I'm going to run through a little bit about who We Create Space is, just so you familiarize yourself with, our work and how we operate in the world. So we are a community-led movement activating social change. We're collective change makers. We're on a mission to improve the lives of LGBTQ plus people and other underrepresented groups, marginalized professionals from around the world. And we do this, we drive change by educating society on the topics around relating to DEI, leadership, and allyship, and providing tools, resources, and access to access a global community network. And so we do this in a variety of ways. But we do recognize that DEI is an incredibly powerful tool for businesses and creating inclusive communities. And we're seeing increasingly that workplaces, new employees are really craving DEI when they're going into the workforce. 76% of employees and job seekers are prioritizing it. So it's so vital that we're having these conversations now. DEI is not something that you can just put on the back burner. It's not a nice to have, it's an essential. In terms of our work, we do a lot of work that is based with corporate clients, things like that, but the efforts from that is then taken and put back into our communities. So we are a community interest social enterprise. All of our profits made from the consultancy work that we do with corporations are then invested back into our communities. And we provide free events, provide resources, panels and discussions like this, and a whole range of opportunities to get involved in our work. But at the center of everything that we do is our communities. We do have a whole range of really happy and successful client relationships that we've had in the past. So 95% of our clients would recommend us, and we do bespoke programs. And so everything we do, all of our ways of working are really tailored to whatever your client needs are and the issues that are impacting you as a workplace. And we do everything through an intersectional lens and through an LGBTQ plus lens, because we're bringing that sense of social change, social justice into everything we do, and that is drawn from our own lived experience. So our aim is to support individuals within their roles as leaders, change agents, and allies. And so the key people that we tend to work with are HR directors, DEI directors, learning development leads, and ERG leads. And we often find that these are the people who are already engaged. They've already got the enthusiasm. They're looking to secure buy-in. They're looking for support. They're looking for peer engagement. And that's what we bring together. We bring through our we're lucky to have this incredible platform of community leaders and people we work with, and we're able to bring that knowledge, that lived experience into the conversation to support one another in driving social change. And so we do this in a variety of ways: workshops and webinars, live conversations and panel discussions like this one, leadership programs and retreats, bespoke content and media partnerships, and consultancy and research. And there's a whole load of other ways that we work, all available on our website, already exciting. The work is constantly developing, and it's constantly developing with community. And that brings us to our latest project, which is the campus. So it's live now. You may already have received links to it. If you've not, it will be, and there'll be links put in the chat. But it's a really exciting project that we have recently launched. And it's a community learning platform. The goal of it is to bring our global community together to engage with the work that we do, to share that knowledge, the experiences that we've had, and to really just build community in a global sense, but also in a local sense as well. So we're going to play a quick little video now that we've put together, just showcasing some of the ways in which the campus functions. video. So this is one of the first times I've played it in a setting like this. So yeah, really excited about the campus. It's a new community learning platform. It brings together queer leaders, DEI change agents, and allies on a global and local level to support personal and professional development. We do this continuing our ethos of learn, connect, and grow. So learn, we've got a plethora of tools, resources, guides, podcasts, various panels and webinars that have been compiled into accessible pathways for you to develop your learning. And soon, we're currently working on some online training courses, which are coming soon. So that's in the grow section. But the core element of it is about community and connect. It's about bringing people together. And that's what we're trying to do. We're really trying to leverage all the incredible people that we work with and offer a space where actually they can connect with one another and they can connect with us and share what they do, where they need support, how we can develop things together, both in a local sense and globally. So it's about strengthening our knowledge and strategies so we can work towards collective change together, building stronger and wider support networks. One of the things I find most difficult about working in the DEI space as a freelance person and as somebody who works with various organizations is there's a kind of sense of isolation occasionally. But actually, this work, we're all doing it together. So that support network element is so vital to this. And that's in doing all that, we come together to drive impactful social transformation. So join us on the campus. It's live at the minute. There'll probably be links going through in the chat, I imagine. But yeah, that's a little bit about We Create Space, what we do and what we've got going on at the moment. And we're gonna dive into our exciting conversation. But before we do that, I would just like to ask you a little question. We're gonna run a little poll for you that my colleague Neil's gonna pop something into the chat or should pop up on your screens. But yeah, just a poll, gauging where you're at in terms of your ERG knowledge or what you're looking for today.
And while people are voting, we can also say huge congratulations on the campus. It's such a brilliant achievement. And as someone who's worked in learning and development so much, I know how much work creating something like that is. So let's just use some of our sound for that because I think it's really worth it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, this is one of the projects I've been working on, and it's been a hefty undertaking, but yeah, it's exciting to see it live and up and running now. And we're just really excited to see where it goes as well, because it really does, like now it's live, it really will grow depending on how people engage with it. So really, really excited.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will grow. Looks beautiful.
Okay, where are we at with this poll? Okay, so we had two questions. Firstly, do you feel your ERGs are effective in creating cultural transformation and opportunities for educational awareness? So 23% saying yes, absolutely. Actually, I would say that's pretty positive. So yes, absolutely, and 68% saying yes, somewhat. So obviously a little bit more work to be done there, but that's kind of encouraging to know that there is a solid foundation to build that work on, and that we're at this stage, I think, in the DEI kind of world. I think a lot of places really took off from 2020 onwards during COVID, after the death of the murder of George Floyd. We saw this kind of push and recognition for the benefits and the needs of DEI initiatives and ERGs in particular. And so I think we're at this stage now where we're seeing that work really kind of be pushed along into these next levels, and it's exciting to see where that will go in our conversation today. And do you feel your workplace is collaborative when it comes to creating an inclusive environment to meet the collective learning needs of you and your colleagues and your employees? Okay, and so we had 71% saying yes and 29% saying no. Again, I think those are pretty healthy figures, and I'm really encouraged by that. Of course, still, could be higher, should be higher, and I think that hopefully will give us some really rich content for this conversation today. We will hold space for questions at the end, and so I'm really excited to see if this work is being done already and there's some really great initiatives happening, if you want to share any of that, you want to ask some deeper questions, some specific questions to our panelists, this is a really great opportunity to do that. And on that note, I would like to open the session up to introduce our panelists. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Really, really excited to pick your brains, to hear what you have to say and your perspectives. I'm gonna ask you all to go around and just introduce yourself. So who are you, pronouns if you're happy to share, what your role is, and yeah, your passions around ERGs perhaps. So let's start with Katya.
Sure. Thank you so much, Yas. My name is Katya Veleva. My pronouns are they, them. I am an inclusion, equity, and diversity consultant, leadership coach, the founder of Blush Cloud. I used to have actually have a background in architecture and digital construction, and my first experience with ERGs is founding one in Grimshaw Architects, which was one of the first kind of construction-related ones that existed, and it was a really great experience to be part of that. But then later in my career, I've done a lot of consulting to support ERGs within bigger organizations. And I think it's really great to be able to observe across industries how they change, and also the life cycle of employee resource groups, because they do have one, and there are particular places where interventions are needed and support is needed if it's not set up, if they organically appear, as opposed to being strategically set up. And I have a huge love for them. I think they're a very special kind of formulation in the corporate world that started to bring really, really positive change in my view. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really excited to hear more, particularly that point around the life cycle of them. So how do we keep them sustainable? Scott?
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Scott Saleh. I use he, they pronouns, and I work in social sustainability and DEI. As part of that, I lead our well-being initiatives and also support across our social mobility, LGBT+, neurodiversity, and domestic abuse work streams, because those are my intersections. And then I am also a breathwork facilitator, because it's one of the ways that I found of supporting people to sort of come back into their bodies and find healing. And yeah, sort of similar to Katya, I'm very passionate about the power of ERG groups. I'm also quite protective of them, because I feel that over time, the expectations have been potentially unfair in certain situations that I've witnessed. So that's what I hope to share a bit about is how to be effective, but also how to be really clear on what an ERG is doing, what is fair for them to be delivering against in a volunteer capacity, and then what is not, what needs to be elsewhere placed within the organization.
Yeah, definitely. So often you see that people go, oh, right, well, there's an ERG now, they can handle all the DEI stuff. And it's like, no, that's not what they're there for. David?
Thanks so much, Yasin. My name is David. My pronouns are they, them. My visual description is I'm wearing a red beret. I have a blue eyeliner and with pink earrings. I'm wearing a cut off the chest cut dress and a blue and a green scarf. I come from India, Kolkata, and I moved to Ireland when I was 21 years old in 2016. I stayed there for 6.5 years, and then I moved to Berlin 2 years ago. I changed job last year, 6 months ago, and currently I'm the head of the data analyst team. In terms of my experience with ERG, I have been like leading an ERG group back in KPMG Ireland on the global level for 1.5 years, and very much involved in different ERG groups back in KPMG and also in the current company where we are just starting right now. It's kind of in an early development phase. And I am really passionate about ERG, specifically speaking the intersectionality part of it, because I feel that there are different criteria that I fall under, for example, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, and the fact that I'm also neurodivergent. I've been diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago. So I think that in the corporate world, ERGs are very, very important for the safety and the visibility of people who might not want to come out, and also to protect everybody in the corporate world. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, definitely want to explore that idea of intersectionality as well, because what we often see or have seen is, people are put out into their different strands, and then but we're not single strand individuals, are we? So while ERGs are beneficial, when it's started to look at as single identity groupings, that doesn't necessarily cover all the needs of every individual. And so, yeah, I really want to touch on intersectional working and how ERGs can work together in an intersectional way. But so let's dive into the questions. I'm just conscious of time. So I'm going to go in with a really meaty one. And I want each of you to please share 1 or 2 examples of best practice and methods when it comes to the power of ERGs, networks, and/or collaborative efforts in the workplace and culture transformation. So some solid practical examples and steps of where you've seen this working really well. And they can kind of touch on some of the issues you've already raised. But let's start with Scott.
Thank you. So it's apt that you just mentioned intersectionality, because that's our number one change that we've implemented. So the events we do are no longer like just by one ERG. At the beginning of the year, we get together as a bit of a strategy day, and we look at the different days, because everyone kind of wants to have a day or a month or thing like that. And we go, well, actually, can we pause and look at actually where the overlap is? Love the quote. Thank you. That's so perfect. But also, I think from a business perspective, the macroeconomic pressure that we're in means that teams have less time, less resource to actually go to different events. So not only are we actually being more efficient with the message that we want to share, but we're also actually cross-pollinating communities. Because some people say, oh, actually, I think only that's relevant to me. But then actually they'll come to an event that maybe they wouldn't have considered, or they'll come to an intersectional event, and suddenly they themselves can benefit from these communities. That actually has business benefits, because now they're improving culture, they're improving collaboration, they're benefiting in so many more ways than just a DEI talk. And I think that is something that we found particularly valuable in a world of hybrid work, where maybe you have fewer touch points to meet people that you don't have as official collaborators or stakeholders. And that, I think, has gone, therefore, into building a bit of the business case. Maybe the second piece is data, which is less fun than an event, but absolutely critical, because often the moral case is not always going to convince everyone, but more data that we have absolutely necessary to create robust business cases, but then also demonstrate progress. Because DEI can feel like, to some people that aren't engaged, well, it's not happening quickly enough. It's maybe not the pace of change that they would expect, because it is a long-term strategy. It's a mid to long-term ambition. But having incremental data so that we can celebrate that progress is really essential to go back and actually ask for more leadership involvement, more budget, more influence. So that's what I'd say. Something a bit fun, something maybe not perceived as fun, but absolutely critical for the foundation.
Yeah, no, I really like both of those, particularly that point around data and using it as something to go back to and fall back on to present evidence as to what change is happening, and you can measure it out. David, your thoughts?
Thanks, Scott, for sharing that. I would just add something to that, because that was really brilliant. Two points. First of all, that from my experience, also sharing the stories of people from different backgrounds really helps. That's something that in the previous company and even in our current company, we have started doing it. And it has been really, really helpful to understand what are the challenges that people on different intersectionality levels face. And the second point that I want to mention is, from my perspective, the policies within the company are very, very important. So to integrate somehow DEI policies within the company. And also, I wanted to mention a very short story that 3 years ago, when I was part of the KPMG Global DEI network, and I worked with several countries in Africa, Middle East, and Asia, and and Europe, there are different countries who have different DEI practices. So there was this one example where one country came to us that they have a female-based ERG group, and they cannot really focus on, let's say, LGBTQ plus based ERG group, and you have to be very clever. And I asked them, so why don't you just change the definition of, or sorry, make it a bit more specific definition of what female means? Instead of just somebody who is a cis female, you can also include a female identifying person, and that would protect a wider group. And it would also somehow, it's kind of like finding a loophole, somehow going around it. Yes, thank you.
Really great example. Just because that's something that we do need to be thinking about, especially working globally, that cultural context is so vitally important, and what's going to work in one area, one field, isn't necessarily going to work somewhere else. And you do have to kind of, as you said, find those loopholes, be quite creative sometimes in your approaches. Yeah, Katya.
Thank you. I have 3 points, and I wanted to, was one of them, reaffirm what Scott was saying around collecting data and incrementally continuing to push that change. I think whatever we're doing, we need to stop thinking about achieving something specific, or that kind of this inclusive environment, inclusive workplace is a thing we're going to get to, put our flags on that island that, you know, everything's fine. It's not, it's like any other business function that's there to improve the business every year, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then in terms of ERG specifically, as I mentioned, they do have these life cycles, especially when they are organically created. And what I've noticed is when there's a new ERG, people gather together. The first step is the wine chamber, right? Everybody gets together and starts complaining. And that's actually not a bad thing, because it's an exercise of validation. So often when you're marginalized, this kind of sense of isolation starts to get you to question your own reality and be like, oh, is this me, or is something inappropriate happening here? Am I really experiencing discrimination or oppression, or maybe like I'm being too sensitive? And at this first step, when you start meeting people who are like you and they start confirming that, you're starting to become much more empowered and really be able to say, wait, we need to make a change. And it's very, very key. But usually when people go through that stage and then move on to actually doing things, mentally they're often over it. And that's fine. That's perfectly normal evolution. They start doing things internally, externally, it's all excellent. But then people move away from organizations, people grow in their careers, maybe they don't have enough time to commit to an ERG, and you need to continue to have fresh blood coming in. So this initial step of validation of new people who may not have been part of the organization, who may come from much more conservative environments, to be able to come into the ERG and have that is actually really important in my experience. And not something that a lot of people pay attention to, because often mentally people move away from that. It needs to be planned. It needs to be something that obviously reduces, I think, in time, but remains this initial step in it. And then my last point is around, I think we mentioned at the start, this voluntary thing. In my experience, what's effective in employee resource groups is when they're properly supported in an organization. It's not a volunteer exercise. There's an allocated amount of time within the time that they're paid to be workers in the company to then support in that aspect. And I think we all have seen many times in which marginalized people were asked to do work for free for people with power. And I think we've agreed that that's not a good thing. And I think it's very important to kind of properly support employee resource groups to do that. And that's a key thing to get it as part of their, as part of people's responsibility that they're being remunerated for.
Yeah, such a vital part of it, that I think it's a conversation that many organizations still struggle with, that element of remunerating people, because it's like, well, this is for your benefit, isn't it? And it's like, no, this is for the benefit of the company as a whole. And yeah, everybody involved in the ERGs as well. And it is work. It's not, you know, just fun. In fact, oftentimes it's incredibly difficult. And I've seen so much additional work be put on ERG leads and even members. And that just not be recognized at all. Kaja, kind of going off what you were saying, and I think you started this conversation around the life cycles and that sustainability element. So how can organizations ensure that these efforts to create culture change and inclusive workplaces have that long-lasting impact that they set out to achieve? I also like what you were saying there about actually it's not necessarily something that is like an end goal, it's ongoing. So could we explore that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So I think ERG specifically have this kind of first step that needs to remain protected, but also a lot of organizations kind of promote that opportunity to be a part of ERG as a leadership skills building exercise. But giving the employee resource groups actual support to organize themselves properly, maybe with a coach, maybe with series of sessions that put them together. And this is also a great opportunity to collect different ERGs and help them learn together in the context of, let's figure out what our governance is. Let's figure out what manifesto is. How are we going to be achieving our goals in a much more structured way? This is the investment an organization needs to make, provide that structure and not expect people to immediately have it done or have enough people with enough seniority to be able to do that. Because also we see often the younger, more junior people will be most keen, also because they can afford the time initially if it's not specifically supported. So this kind of very pragmatic structure to it is super helpful. I've supported ERG in an FMCG organization, big global one, and this was one of the most impactful things that we did. Was we organized these kind of goal setting and governance sheets. There were two very, very simple template sheets that they were given, and it was several of their main ERG leads. And we got reports that within a month, everyone within the ERGs were using them to kind of structure their work. So it could be very little support, but as long as it's kind of dedicated, can really start cranking the wheel up.
Yes.
You're on mute.
I think you're muted.
Sorry. So something that requires a structure and something solidly in place, even if it's not loads and loads of different types of support, but just recognizing that it does need to be organized and available regardless of who is in the lead. And I think you like that point you made around the fact that oftentimes it is more junior employees who are stepping to these positions. So how can you make sure that they are fortified, given the support that they need to succeed, rather than being kind of ground down even further? Scott?
Yeah, so if I come back to the principle of your question, like long-lasting impact, that means that we need to be less just initiatives and more system change, more looking at corporate philosophy, more looking at KPIs, looking at compensation. Those are the more difficult things, but those are the much more impactful ones, because I feel like a lot of the ERGs that I've been a part of, and to Katya's point, those that sort of happen organically, is very much like we're going to put an event on, and then we're going to raise awareness, and then we can get stalled there. So some of the strategic interventions that Katya mentioned, I think are quite relevant. So from my approach, it's looking at things like the narrative, the corporate philosophy, because then every time you're requesting for support from your senior leadership, you can say, hey, we're helping you deliver on what you set out to achieve. So this is not just an ad hoc request. This is us delivering consistently every month on what you set out, what you promised to your people, what you promised to your stakeholders and shareholders. The biggest win that we've experienced, which was not easy, but I would recommend anyone try to tackle, was tying it to compensation. If you can get any of the DEI targets tied to compensation, massively, incredibly difficult and contentious potentially, but depending on how ambitious you feel your leadership is, that can be fundamentally the biggest change, because it's performance going to be linked to actually those outcomes. And if your business is in a place where you can do that, that's when things really start to change. A lot of the people that you might have struggled to get meetings with, suddenly they're the ones booking meetings with you. It really shifts the power balance. Another thing that has been really impactful was reverse mentoring. So one of our CEOs said that it was the most they had learned in years of listening to different things or reading a podcast or whatever was actually being one-on-one with someone that had the lived experience of a underrepresented group that they knew not enough about. So they made the time as part of a leadership reverse mentoring program. And the amount of support that now we get from this person is just, I mean, it's just heroic because it touched them in a really special way. And so I think storytelling can be great depending on the different avenue. Panels are great, but I also encourage people because I think something that I witnessed with you in our ERGs is we get like panel fixation. So anytime we want to do something, do a panel. And I know it's amusing because we're on a panel right now, but I'm also encouraging us to explore like other bits of bite-sized content because people can't always join a 45-minute webinar, but they can take a little bit of a bite-sized content. So how can we tell people stories in other way? Maybe it's a GIF or a few photos and some slides. We've also explored like beautiful long-term video content or like modular training so people can kind of dip in and out because as we mentioned at the top of the call, people are busy, our attention spans are fragmented. So, okay, how do we then meet people where they are while still sharing the information we want to need in order to keep their engagement? So yeah, I'd say change the content type, but then look at like, what are the systemic things that we can start to influence? Because then you'll have people coming to you instead of you always trying to get time with them.
Really, really great. There's so much there, but I really like that idea around mixing up your approaches and thinking about what works and what's, especially, and I think there's things around, recognizing, understanding the ways that your businesses function. So are there peak times where, panels aren't necessarily going to be feasible or attendance might be low for that, but could you, that doesn't mean that this work stops during those periods. Are there just different ways of engaging and reaching out to people? And that point that you made around just centering the person, right? That person-to-person engagement. So with reverse mentoring and any other ways of finding that is just so powerful, right? That's where the change really happens when we center people in that conversation. And the business case is essential, but ultimately that is what we're talking about. And so yeah, I think that's such a powerful tool that we have at our disposal. David, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? I'm quite intrigued by you, as you said, you're starting a new ERG at the minute. So are there things you've put into place to ensure sustainability?
Yes, so so currently, well, when I was in KPMG 7.5 years ago, then we also started the ERG. It was a new ERG in KPMG, and I was also starting to come out. So it kind of coincided with each other. And I'm using those experiences now in the new ERG. While I was there in KPMG, we decided to distinguish between the different levels in terms of layers where the ERGs are located, and then go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. You cannot one cannot expect that a ERG which is starting out at level 1 will straight away go to level 5 or 6, for example. So we have this little goals that we are trying to do in the current ERG setup, whereas what is the percentage of Scott talked about numbers, what's the percentage of attendance that people are committing to ERGs and things like that. The other thing that I really wanted to add to that is we should not forget about the policy and kind of tying the ERG strategy and the goals to the company strategy and the goals. For me, that's very important because once it's tied to the company strategy and goals, it will be very difficult to break that. It will be really, really difficult to break that. And that is where also the challenge lies, as Scott says, that you have to tie that also somehow with the compensation and etc. etc. So you have to be very mindful of these kind of things.
Brilliant. So something that I'm sure all of you will have faced is the people who are reluctant or actively against DEI, don't think it's necessary, don't think they need to get involved, and obviously they're very often the people who need to get involved the most. So how do you navigate and bring those people in, specifically the people who are pushing back or maybe presenting specific challenges against the initiatives that you're trying to put forward? And are there some specific strategies for engagement that you have with them or examples where you've seen successes? So Katya, let's start with you.
Sure. My main strategy, which I'm open to criticism on, because it does take up a lot of my energy, but to be honest, has been successful pretty much the entire time, is usually when someone has a big issue with EDI, I try to take the position of the most power in that situation and listen to them, because it usually will become coming from a point of not being seen, and there may be like an underlining marginalization which is not obvious, or something of the sort, where people just want something for themselves as well. And when you listen to someone and you allow them to open themselves to you, and that's a skill, you know. Obviously, I'm a very experienced coach, and I this is how I work with people. Usually I can always find the connection. I can always find the connection from what they truly want, and they're coming from, into the concept of inclusion for all. I also talk a lot about, and this always takes a little bit longer, but we've mentioned intersectionality. We've managed to quote Audre Lorde in the first 2 minutes of our conversation, so I think we need a gold star for that somewhere. But truly, when you dig enough, you can see that we're all connected in so many ways. Fat phobia and racism come hand in hand. The gender binary was reinforced by eugenics. And if you allow people enough time to kind of educate themselves gradually and see how there is this network, whenever we're lifting one marginalized group, we're lifting another one. And truly the kind of the face of what's non-marginalized, really a very narrow idea of a person, and nobody really fits in that mold, even if they are a cis straight white male in the Western world. There may be some caregiving responsibility we're not aware of. There may be socioeconomic background, health issues, and so on. And once people start understanding how these things connect, it's so much easier to work together, and it's so much more effective as well when we're advocating across our needs. So I usually, and as I said, it's something that takes up a lot of energy, and I think it's very important to always assess where we are and if we are able to take on something like that. And I'll always first say, where are you at? How safe do you feel? How strong do you feel at this time? And if you don't feel like it's the battle for you today, don't do it. Just don't. Find another ally, find someone that may be able to. But when you do, and I feel like this is a privilege of mine that I do find it quite something that I can access, a skill to just sit with someone who I may be entirely in a position for and make them feel heard. Once you kind of go through that, they usually come on the side. In my experience, they have.
Yeah, no, I really do love that point, and I think that is one of the key benefits of having intersectional networks, is that you might not necessarily be as deeply impacted by an issue as another group, and that's when your solidarity and your allyship matters the most. David, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, thanks so much. I 100% agree with what Katya said. And I just have like a little bit to add, is that I think that we have to also think about the long term and think about the bigger picture. So it's not only just ERG and corporate, it's also ERG and personal life. So what I generally start with is in the same way, communication, like Katya talked a lot about communication over there. It is very important where the other person is coming from. So you sit down. The first question I ask is, do you have a person that is your friend from that background? And most of the times, what I have noticed is that that question strikes a nerve into people's minds. They start thinking. So even during, so I'm currently traveling, I'm on a vacation, and during the travels, 2-3 times it has happened, they might be working with a corporate, doesn't matter. They might not have ERG, doesn't matter. But I just ask, well, do you have a non-binary friend? Or do you have a friend who is racially diverse? And then they start, and they start opening up, like they open up more. And then you are like asking them a lot more questions. Okay, so what do you think are their challenges, and what do you think that they face? How can you support them? These are like little drips and drabs that you are just throwing at them. And what they are doing is that their mind is slowly working. It's subconsciously happening. They are like, maybe they haven't thought about it, and they're like, oh, maybe I should talk with my friend. Oh, maybe I should check in with them. Oh, maybe I should ask them what they do. So this is something that we need to be. So that's one way going. I'm a big favor of going to one person at a time. So from a person to a person, because that's where I believe has the most impact. So this is like one way that you can think about, including people. The second of all is that you have to remember that when 100 people accept a meeting, there's going to be a 50% fallout. So it's going to stick to 50% of the people, and that's just the way it is. There might be some people, you are not going to please anybody, the same way that they have to accept the people, the diverse people we are. We also have to accept the diverse people they are, which means that have to accept the fact that different people have different opinions, but it's more about, in my experience also, that the openness ties into that, because the more open you are towards them, the more warm they become towards you. Because a lot of people have told me this, that it feels like DEI is being forced down their throats, and I would never want DEI to be forced down their throat. That's not the way it should be. There is a very small example I want to give on top of that, is that I had a chat with a person who is being interviewed in a company, or who is looking for a job, right? A lot of the times what happens when you are looking for a job, in my experience, that person told me, and a lot of other people told me, they hardly look for companies with ERG. They might look for companies who are a bit more open, who have like a DEI statement. And that's why I mentioned that it's very important to tie the DEI strategy with the company strategy. Personally speaking, when I am looking for a job, I don't look for when a company has ERG or not. The first thing I look for is they have like a statement or not in the recruitment section. And that is very, very important. I want to reiterate again that we are not going to bring everybody, but it's the effect is like a cumulative effect. You can influence 2 people, those 2 people can influence 2 other people, and we all have to be very, very open towards everything. Thank you.
I love both of those answers because I think they both center around empathy and trying to understand what are the blockages there, and then you can start to address them. But it's almost that, you might not win everybody, but you can start making small impact here and there, and that is still a win, and we shouldn't overlook that. So I'm just conscious of time, and we do have some interesting questions in the chat. So Scott, I'm going to come to you with this first one, and if you did have anything that you wanted to add on to the last point as well, then feel free as well. But we've got this great question that was in relation to what you mentioned about reverse mentoring. Do you have any guideline structures, support that you put into place that drove the outcomes you were hoping for? Were there any learnings from the processes that you put into place?
Yeah, so for reverse mentoring, what made it successful was presenting it as a collective challenge that the whole leadership team was going to go through together. So it was sort of pitching it to them as a developmental experience, as opposed to, we need your time, you're doing this other group a service. Is actually saying, there are issues, there are risks in our business, there are also opportunities if you get this right. Sort of framing it in the same way as a business case, and saying, here's something that you're going to benefit from, but you're also going to benefit underrepresented and marginalized communities. You're going to benefit the business as a result. So it was very much framing it as a win-win-win, as opposed to, can we just get a bit of your time and say, here are the issues that we've identified, here's your role and how you can solve them. And that landed really well. It was also really beneficial for them because they went through it as a team, and they were able to actually debrief it together. And that way, again, I love this term cross-pollination because I love bees. But it's just like, what was learned by one member of the team, they actually brought to a forum. So it wasn't mandatory, but most actually showed up. We said, look, we're going to do a forum where you can come and share your learnings. And even people who had really busy schedules, like I said, the CEO themselves, came because it was so impactful, and because they were engaged, then their direct reports were engaged and theirs, and it really flowed well, because I feel that sometimes with senior sponsorship, it can be, again, a bit ad hoc. It's like, oh, could you introduce this person, or could you introduce this meeting or this event? Whereas this was much more an in-depth approach, and it was over not a long period of time, but enough to make it valuable. So it was generally, depending on schedules, like a 1 to 2 month experience. So that way it was short enough of having 3 to 4 meetings, which is good for a mentorship relationship, fixed on like, okay, what sort of outcomes we want to drive this. And then, like I said, that opportunity at the end to actually share back the learnings, most importantly, that emotional impact, because that led to a lot of the change. It wasn't, we worked a lot on the logical, but here we were working a lot on the one-to-one storytelling. I would also say that it was beneficial for the underrepresented communities, because a lot of them said, you know what, I don't want to get up on a panel and tell my story. That is a lot of emotional work you're asking me to do. But I am comfortable having a one-on-one chat, because I can share my story privately, because sometimes, damn, it is traumatic stuff. And please do not put me on stage. I come to work. Please don't parade me around. But they were really willing to lean in and go deep when it was a one-on-one. So again, finding different forums where people can say, yes, I'm willing to share, but it's within my boundaries, within my comfort, and honoring that as well.
Yeah, so just again, that like the people connection coming through, but also even within that though, putting those strategies and structures into place and giving people that opportunity. Like it seems like you created the structure and then they kind of ran with it, and they found the forum and that space to share their learning, to share their growth. And that's ultimately what we want, for them to feel that it is their responsibility, their role, but also they are engaged. Like they can see the benefit of participating and engaging and being and doing so from a genuine place and really driving that work. I'm gonna sort of combine 2 questions that are in that have been put forward by the audience, and it sort of actually goes off what you were saying a little bit, or what ties into what you were saying, Scott. So this is around securing buy-in, and there's 2 parts of it, because I'm combining 2 questions. So the first one is about securing more buy-in, and particularly more budget from senior leaders and stakeholders, especially during recession periods. And the second question is about sort of similar things, like management who are saying, who don't necessarily see the value in ERGs and so are disengaged from them. And we have sort of touched on this a little bit, but I think there's 2 things there about the buy-in, particularly the budget at levels, and then again that where they're struggling to see the value of ERGs. So maybe Katja, this is something you could speak to.
Sure. I think it kind of goes back to communication in a lot of ways, because we have the data. It's clear. You need to look up, there's McKinsey, there's Deloitte reports, there's academic pieces of research, which very clearly outline the benefits of inclusive workplaces and how much better organizations perform when they have inclusive workplaces. And it's really helpful to have these at hand and be able to flash numbers like that. Again, just as Scott said, treat it as a business case, and you have the backing of that. But also it's important to figure out, again, who's listening on the other side, and what is their way of decision making and understanding. Because again, academic research tells us that we don't make rational decisions. On the whole, people just don't make rational decisions. You can bring in all of the data there that proves everything, that's peer reviewed and all that jazz, and people are not going to make the decisions because they have certain fears. Mostly negative things drive us, again, as a whole, as a blanket statement. So there'll be fears around pushback, there'll be fears about around losses. Again, from a psychological point of view, if you look at it, there's kind of, I think there are 4 types of these kind of exclusion fears, and it's around material loss and around social inclusion, status loss. And if you can address some of those things directly when you're making your proposal, and as clearly as possible communicated that it is the positive, then you can have a movement. But it's helpful to understand, what is the biggest problem for the person you're trying to get that buy-in for, because truly it will be, yeah, it's recession. Do you want to be able to perform better? you want to do that. And on the other hand as well, in terms of collaborative working, inclusive practices boost collaborative working tremendously because they really share principles in a lot of ways. So there's definitely that. But again, when we go back to people who just directly oppose it, you need to understand what is the reason there to be able to address it. And they'll be different at times. But having some of that information at hand and being able to say, you know, this is the evidence, I find helpful.
Thank you. I love, yeah, things having that evidence hand in hand with the personal engagement. I think that's, we're using all the tools available to us. Okay, so I've just got one final really quick question, and then I want us to all leave with your key takeaways. So maybe David, you could share your thoughts on what tips do you have for re-energizing ERG that has lost its spark or its engagement?
Thanks so much. Oh, that's a difficult one because I have been in those scenarios. Yes. Well, honestly speaking, there is one thing that we have done before is there is no point in trying to revive it the entire year around. This is my opinion, that there's no point in there's no point in reviving it the whole year around. But we focus on certain parts of the year. If the data suggests that, I don't know, during January and February, ERGs are very active, then focus on that. You know, we have a concept in the marketing that, you know, we always focus on the customers that stay with us because it's much more costlier if a customer leaves than to buy in new customers. So we focus on the times of the year where the ERGs are the most active, and we strengthen them. And we also have seen that when we do strengthen them, it's a long-term process, and the data has shown this, that, you know, it somehow gets feed into the other years as well. Sorry, the other time period as well. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that constant, relentless badgering. It really helps. Please badger away like a broken radio. You have to keep hitting it. It's like when you are like doing exercise and then you don't do exercise for a long time and then your progress kind of slowly declines, right? It's the same thing with ERGs. You have to constantly badger everyone. You have to constantly badger yourself. And that's how the whole concept will be re-energized and will relive.
I have to say about that, just annoy people until they listen to you. But it is, you just got to be relentless with these things because in so many ways, one of the greatest tools of these oppressive systems is to grind us down, to drain our energy, and make us feel like we're not making any progress, like we're helpless. So yeah, you do have to kind of, as you said, badging yourself as well. Okay, we'll just do very quickly some key takeaways or final tips, anything you want to leave our audience with, and then we'll wrap up the session, and just say thank you so much for your participation today. But let's start with Scott. Final takeaways.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just continuing the badgering point. We like to ask people how they prefer to receive information, because there's no point in badgering by newsletter or email if people go, I don't read those. So how do people prefer to receive that information? And a lot of us is still, we find it's in all hands. We're like, please just talk to me. Just talk to me. But my other takeaway would be what I shared in the chat, is looking at a framework to protect the ERG members as well, because it is unfair to demand more than is fair. So the one that I really like is the DARE, but find a framework that works, but just really be clear on like what we are accountable for, but then actually it allows you to push back on leadership and say, this is not us, this is you, and this is how we're going to check in with you through the year, because we are actually working together to drive these things forward. Because I've just seen too many times where things are just sort of dumped on ERGs and you say, oh, well, you didn't achieve that, so, and that's not on. It's a collaborative effort.
And so much of what's been said around shifting that power and pushing it back onto the people who are in positions of power and who do have the potential to influence. David, your thoughts apart from badgering?
Thank you. I think everybody has shared so many things. I will say that please find a person in the company, I'm pretty sure there is, who is going to be your strongest ally, and go after that person. Like, go and talk to them, and that person is going to drive that and is going to support you and is going to help you. It has supported and helped me a lot of the times, and I have also asked some of my friends also to do similar things, and generally it does happen that there is somebody in the power who is going to support you unconventionally and wholeheartedly. Please go after that person, and you are going to get all the support you need.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we've got our some key takeaways put up there as well. Nakachi, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share? I know you've been putting things in the chat, and we've also got our feedback link in the chat, which we really, really encourage you. It's so important to us and to our work to make sure we keep improving. So if you could click on that feedback link and fill that in very quickly, and then Kachi is going to give us their takeaways.
Yeah, yes, I think I'm going to go back to something that you said at the start, and with our quote that we started. I think it's an intersectional effort, and there's a lot we can do for each other. When we start these groups, as we said, yeah, there is this kind of camaraderie, this validation that we have. When we go into action, the more united we are, the stronger impact we can have. So those intersectional approaches, I think, could be very, very important.
Amazing. Okay, thank you, everybody. Yeah, we've got the takeaways were put up there, and just a really nice roundup of everything we've been saying today. There's been so much really, really great information, and we really appreciate for all of you taking the time this afternoon just to share your experiences. And it's just been so vital. As I said, please do fill in the feedback link. And is there anything else that we need to do on our end administration-wise, Neil?
No, we're all good. Just to thank everyone for coming.
Yeah, I really appreciate you giving your time up. And do join the campus, get in touch, continue these conversations, keep them going. I feel like there's so much learning that we do, obviously from people who have so much experience, but also from one another who are going through this at the moment as well. So please do keep sharing, and we learn as much as from you and from everybody who's been sharing in the chat as you may do from us in the conversation we've had today. So really, thank you for your time. Do fill in that feedback link and do join our next sessions. I think we've got one coming up in a couple of weeks, if I'm correct. Similar time. Yeah, so thank you, everybody. Really, really great conversation today.
Thanks, everyone.